Have you ever met one of those people who just can't be stopped? It's like they're unstoppable.
Yeah, I have.
Me too.
What's their mystique?
Nothing stops these people.
Don't stop.
Welcome to Mission Unstoppable with Coach Frankie Picasso. You're about to meet some of the most amazing people.
Stop. Don't stop.
They've accomplished their goals despite insurmountable odds. They beat adversity, physical hardship, and traumatic events, and emerged triumphantly. They're people just like you and me, and they're winners. Are you unstoppable? Here's Frankie to show you how.
Hello there, and welcome to Mission Unstoppable. It's so great to be back. I've had a week or two off. I was on vacation, and it was so great of you to come back and join me today. I'm really, really happy. We have a wonderful guest. Today, we are going on another mission as usual, and our guide is Michelle Emson. Michelle is an entrepreneur. She's an LGBTI human rights activist, keynote speaker. She's a workshop facilitator and a documentary filmmaker. She's an openly out transgender woman who crossed the pond from England and is now currently residing in Muskoka, Ontario, which is in Canada, for those of you who don't know. Michelle transitioned late in life at the age of 50, and today at 56, we're going to find out how life is treating her. Michelle says that one is never too old nor too young to step into their true, authentic selves and live the life they deserve without being bound by outdated social constructs of gender identity and sexuality. And I think that she is proof of those words. So welcome to Mission Unstoppable, Michelle.
Oh, thank you, Frankie. It's great to be here. Thanks for having me on the show.
You know, it truly is my pleasure. I wrote a book about midlife, and and I say that midlife is a time for transformation. And I think if we haven't done it before then midlife, you know, that midlife crisis, if that's what they call it, I coined it a metamorphosis, actually. It does it for us. And I'm not saying that maybe you had yours at 50, but what do you think? You're living your truth today, which is what I believe happens when we transition to that. So what would you say?
Oh, goodness. Yeah, I think my midlife crisis, if we want to call it that, it was almost 20 years, I think. So 10 years. So 20 years ago, 1997 was a pivotal year. And that's really when I come to realize that life is a gift. And it's a gift to us. And we have a choice. And we have a choice as to how we live it. And how we show up in the world. And in 1997, just before her 30th birthday, I lost my sister to cancer.
Oh, sweet.
And yeah, thank you. But one of the really key things there was it suddenly dawned on me that I have a choice. I have some choices left right up until the time I meet my demise. Choices that she doesn't have. Right? So she doesn't have the choice of life. She doesn't have the choice of how she shows up or who she is or what she does or you know, how she lives her life. And that was a pivotal moment for me, but it still took me 10 years to have the courage to really face what I was going through. And then start my journey of actually stepping into my authentic self. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's a really great point because, you know, when you're faced with mortality, and you and even at midlife, you know, I say that you have maybe 30 years to live forward or 40 if people are lucky, but they've lived a lifetime behind them. And you look back and you go, wow, that went in a blip. And so your choice to be authentic and to live as yourself, that was a good wake-up call. You know, it was, I could totally see how that would be, that you needed to step out and be you. And be seen as you. And you wrote to me and you said that you don't transition from a man to a woman. You were always a woman. You just had to show up and claim
That's
her.
exactly right. Yeah, it is. It's exactly right. You know, I've always known who I was. I just had no frame of reference growing up in the 60s in suburban England. And we had no internet. You know, there was no Google. I couldn't do that kind of stuff. And so I had no frame of reference to try and figure out what on earth was going wrong with me. And so what I did was I internalized it in a very, very negative way for many, many years. And you know, that was my struggle. But, you know, I've always being a woman, it just took me almost 40 years to stop dressing up as a guy.
Well, you did marry and you had a family. You raised stepchildren. You said, what was your wife like? What was the woman that you chose? What was she like?
She was
you seem to me, just before you tell us, like you just seem very serene and mild mannered, and it could, that I don't know you that well, so that could be the front that you put on, but I think that's who you are. So what's a woman like?
Yeah, I don't put on fronts anymore. That's one of the key things that's stepping into that. But she was an amazing, amazing woman, and we had almost 25 years together before I completely blew up her world with revealing who I truly was. And so, one of the worst things that I had to deal with, and so did she in a very big way, was the deceit. Right. Yeah. And the lies. Now, it wasn't that I was malicious in that deceit. It wasn't that I intentionally set out to deceive anybody. Quite the reverse. In fact, quite the reverse. Because, what I did, as I internalized that as a child, what I did was I realized what I needed to do to show up and survive in the world. And to survive, going through puberty, which was a nightmare first time. Much more fun second time. Nightmare the first time. Showing up in the world, and how do I become accepted? And, my family was kind of fragmented and broken. And I spent, a lot of time trying to be accepted by my parents and by my peers and so on. And that acceptance was very important to me. And in hindsight, I can see how I elected to do everything that was expected of me, which was, of course, to have a family, and I loved that family dearly, and I still do.
Did you play sports? Did you go to boarding school? Did you did people think that you were a strange man, or did they just think you were a geek, or how would you have described the man that you were, what people saw every day?
What people saw, of course, was a facade.
Sure, yeah, the facade.
Right, was that facade. And like I said, I would be a chameleon during that time, right? Yeah, so I would be whatever you needed me to be for us to have a relationship. Now, when I say relationship, I don't necessarily mean intimate. I mean any relationship between two human beings, right?
Exactly.
And so absolutely, I was a chameleon. I would do whatever you needed me to do in order to be accepted within your circle. Now, having said that too, what was I like back then? I was always into theater. I was into photography. I was, this combination. I had this duality, and I still do actually, of the creative as well as the analytical. So very much right brain, left brain. There's a balance with me, and I kind of live between those two things and bring them together, which is what I love doing.
That's nice.
Yeah. So, but I would have been probably fairly shy, quiet, not overtly social, somewhat driven, but often isolated, right? Because burning inside of me was this dysphoria, right? We actually refer to it as that term of gender dysphoria, right. And it very much was dysphoria. It was dysphoric. It was painful. It was hard, and I took on the role of society, and I judged myself, and I judged myself very hardly, very harshly, and that affected how I showed up, because it was critical to me that I could not reveal any hint of my femininity, right? So even as a child, growing up, any sign of that was knocked back. And in fact, even my name, this is an interesting one. So even my name, and I'd rather not refer to my old one,
that's fine.
But Michelle was actually a name that my father used when he was referring to any sort of hint of my femininity. So in a very derogatory way, right?
Wow.
And I actually chose to take that name back because for most of my life, I disliked it dreadfully, right?
Yeah,
Michelle was just a dreadful name to me. And so I chose to take that back and enjoy it. Yeah.
Nice. I love that. I like that a lot. So we've got, I guess, maybe 2 minutes. I'm thinking, since you gave me the 3-minute warning here, that we're going to go to a commercial break. So I don't want to get into the whole big thing, but I do want to know, when we come back from that, let's talk about the day, the hour, the minute when it was like, I'm done, and I'm going to be Michelle from now on. So I want to go there. The losses, I mean, like you talked about the deceit. The deceit was, that you were a woman, but would you say the love was real? The love for your family was real? The love that you had for your children and your wife was real?
Oh my gosh, absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely.
So,
there was nothing fake about that. That's genuine, and I still love them, all of them, to this day. I do.
And what's most painful is what you shared with me, is that you lost everybody.
I did. Yes.
And what a sad affair when people can't see beyond their prejudices to look at a human being that they loved and lived with and laughed with, and can't see them.
Oh my gosh. True, but looking at it from the other perspective, that's a big thing to deal with. And when that person that you love, right? I'm thinking of this from my ex-wife's perspective here. When the person that you love is suddenly showing up and saying, "Actually, that's not me. This is me." Right. They didn't buy into that at any point in time. Did they ever buy into that? And so that's a big shift for people to embrace and to deal with. And the closer you are, right, in that first circle of influence, the closer you are, the harder it is to accept that change. So it's very rare for couples to survive the transition of a partner.
I'm not thinking that you would survive the transition, but I'm thinking that the relationship wouldn't end, as far as, I still know you, you're still my friend, I still care about you. I think that's, for me, is the harder part. I mean, my best friend came out as gay, and he never told me. Never. He actually didn't even really come out until one day, "I'm living with this guy now." And I'm like, "Oh, okay, great." He never actually said the words. And yet, he was my friend and I loved him, and nothing ever changed. We're going to commercial break. Don't go away. Michelle has a lot more to talk to us about, and we're going to want to hear it. So stick around, stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Don't stop.
That's right. Don't stop listening. Mission Unstoppable with Coach Frankie Picasso will continue right after these messages.
Stop.
It's words you never heard.
Whenever we hear a recording of our own voice, it always sounds different than we think. This is because the bones in our skull create a resonance from within that makes our voice sound deeper to us. But our recorded voice is how others hear us. I'm sure I'm not the first person who has uttered the words, "I really don't sound like that." Do I? Margaret Thatcher famously underwent vocal training to lower her voice and make her sound more statesmanlike. Recently, British Airways polled Americans and Britons to see who they believed had the sexiest voices. Morgan Freeman was voted #1. If a judge loves the sound of his own voice, expect a long sentence. What's a word for a person who loves to hear the sound of their own voice? A philodox.
It's words you never heard.
I'm Carolyn Davidson, and you can have fun challenging your words you never heard vocabulary with my free app, Too Funny for Words.
It's the Fitness Minute with fitness expert Annette Hammond.
Whether you call it love handles, muffin top, belly fat, or spare tire, all describe body fat around the midsection. When abdominal muscles are tight and defined, it looks great. But in most cases, excess fat seems to conjugate around your middle, and it's big and flabby. If you think that working out on abdominal machines, like the ones sold on TV or in the gym, will rid your body of love handles, think again. You cannot spot reduce. You can't do thousands of crunches and expect to get a flat, tight abdomen. Belly fat is exactly that, fat around your belly. And the way to lose fat is through aerobic exercise and a low-calorie, low-fat diet. You can drop those love handles by losing weight through cardio exercise and continue toning the abs through safe abdominal crunches. For the Fitness Minute, I'm Annette Hammond.
And we're back. Thanks for sticking around. You are listening to Mission Unstoppable Radio. I am your host, Frankie Picasso, and my guest today is Michelle Emson. And before we went to break, we were talking about the breakdown of Michelle's marriage when she finally came out and told her wife and family that she was indeed a woman and needed to live that fact. So, Michelle, do you remember you told me just off here that the marriage, you guys went on another 3 years. You struggled through those 3 years to try to come to terms, I guess, with what was going on. And you said to find a cure, try to get cured.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, I spoke to a therapist in 2008. This was the very first time I had spoken to another living soul about the way I felt and what I was dealing with. And it took me a long time, actually, in therapy, dealing with issues before I had the courage to even do that. And then following that, it was, when I shared that news, and I shared it the day of with my wife, and, by that point, I was convinced that she must know something was amiss, right? Mm-hmm. But she wasn't. She had no clue, no idea. And so that day in May 2008, I just blew her life apart. Yeah. And family still remains dear to me, even though we're estranged. And it was important to me. And I did try. I worked hard. I worked in therapy. We sought all sorts of crazy ideas, trying to find a cure. And I would do this. I would go into my therapist's office and I would sit down and I'd be crying and I would be pleading to give me a cure because I knew that I was going to lose everybody. Mm-hmm. And so I did try that. And of course, the only cure is to step into your true self and to own it. But it just took me a while to come to that realization, I guess, and see that was the path forward for me.
Had that therapist ever met someone who was transgender?
That's a controversial issue, actually, because I didn't have a great experience with a number of therapists. But I did eventually, and it was almost a year later, found a therapist actually in my hometown. I'd been searching oh my gosh, I was going everywhere. I was driving halfway across the province.
Oh my gosh.
Trying to find a therapist who had that experience so that I felt safe to come out.
Yes.
And quite by accident, I found that therapist to be right in my hometown of Milton. It was incredible. So we had a great relationship. We did a lot of great work. And the result of that work was me. As you see me and how I am today, right? So,
because I just have to think that therapist that you saw in the beginning when you were pleading with him, just should have looked at you and said, there is no cure. There's not a cure for this, right? They remind, like Vice President Pence, when he went through his, gay cure and wants all the gay people in the world to go through the cure now. Come on, we don't believe you.
There is no gay cure.
There is no cure. There's no gay cure.
No, there is no gay cure. There's no trans cure. It's not out there. And in fact, a comical thing here is transition for me was a year. So 2011 in its entirety was my transition year. And I went to see my therapist at the end of that. I think it was in December. And I hadn't been seeing her very much during that year. I just didn't need it, right? I was good and I was going. But, I walked into her office and I sat down, the confident woman that I am, and said, please, give me a cure, give me the cure, a bit tongue-in-cheek.
Yes.
And she did not bat an eyelid. She just sat there and said, I think we've done that. Right? I think we've done, and she was absolutely right. The only right path, and we know that now, is to transition, and the social transition, which is the biggest part of all of that, and to step into your power, step into your authentic self, and it's incredibly liberating. It's hard. Don't get me wrong. It's a brutal journey, and I wouldn't wish it on anyone. But it's also incredibly liberating.
And I'm glad that you said that, because one of the arguments especially, probably early, like you 90s, in the 90s and early 2000s, when people would talk about gay pride, or they would talk about people who are gay, and they go, well, why don't they get a cure? Why are they doing this? Like, why don't they just, cure themselves or stop pretending or whatever? And I'm like, why would somebody put themselves through this if it wasn't real? Like, nobody in their right mind would do that. It's too difficult. Nobody wants the whole world raining on their parade and hating them and beating them up and doing all kinds of horrible things to them if it wasn't who they were. Like, it just boggles the mind that people would think that people are pretending.
Absolutely. And you know what? There's three aspects to this. So there's our gender identity, which is our innate sense of self, right? And that's between the ears. That's in our brain, it's in our mind, it's in our soul, and it's in our heart. There is our sexual orientation, which is very, very separate, right? And then there is our gender expression. And gender expression is how we show up in the world. This is the only one that is a choice.
Right.
Right. The other two are not.
And your
choices.
choice was that you showed up previously in men's clothing.
Yes.
Yeah. Because you are so empathic and you were able to see from your ex-wife's point of view, what was she feeling other than hurt and betrayal? What was some of the thoughts that went through her that really, because I'm sure there's other people listening and they want to, they're going to go through this or have gone through this with partners. What were her arguments? What did she reel against?
I think there were two things, really. She had a very clear vision of us growing old together.
Okay.
Right? And how the rest of our lives were going to play out, and where we were going to be, and what we were going to be doing, and and all this sort of thing. We had just the best time together. We did. And so that was one thing, because what I did immediately was to blow up that vision, right? All of a sudden, that security, that safety that I'd worked hard to create for her and for the family was now gone, right? And so that's one thing. The other thing, which is really critical here, is that it had an impact on her own sense of identity. It called into question her identity, right?
Yeah, that's where I was going. Yeah.
Yeah. And
so did she think, oh my God, I'm a lesbian?
Well, and absolutely adamant that she wasn't. Right. And, what she needed and what she wanted was her husband. What she did not want was another girlfriend. She didn't need a girlfriend, right? And she didn't need she definitely wasn't into having a wife, not at all.
Right.
And so, my actions impacted her sense of identity and also the perception of her identity in society. So, she was very concerned, of course, by how others around her in society and in the community generally what they would think of her as a result of what I'd done here and the relationship that we had.
Right.
So really, it was totally no go as far as she was concerned, and I was the bitch that stole her husband. And she actually said it would have been easier if I'd have had an affair, right?
Yes, she could have blamed. Yeah.
Yeah, right. She could have blamed the other woman.
Because you don't want to go screaming at the world. Well, my husband, who's now my wife.
Exactly. Yeah, and that just totally was not going to work for her, and I totally get that.
How old was she?
She was 8 years older than me. So
she was. Oh, that's even harder.
58.
Okay.
That time. Yeah.
Yeah. So so the other, I could see where she's like, you stole my youth, and how am I going to get a guy now?
Right.
And go in the future. Yeah, I totally see that.
So there was a lot of that.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Wow. And the children were what age?
Oh, the children were in their 40s.
Okay.
Yeah,
so grown-ups and able to make up their own mind if they wanted to.
They were, but of course their allegiance was with their mother, right?
Right,
and I was the person that had inflicted incredible pain and hurt on their mother. And so they chose, quite naturally and probably quite rightly, because I think we mentioned their stepchildren. So they were 11 and 13, I think, when we got together. So I raised them through those years, and also the 6 grandchildren.
Oh my gosh.
That I miss desperately.
Yes.
And so they, naturally they aligned themselves with their mother and supported their mom. And so they all moved back to England, and I haven't really heard of them since.
Well, there is, good news on this horizon that you are now engaged, and you're engaged to Elena Semenova, and she is Ukrainian-born LGBTQI human rights activist, and also the World Kettlebell champion and coach. And you met her at Gay Pride in Toronto?
Yes, so I met her at World Pride in Toronto at 2014. So Toronto Pride hosted World Pride, and also hosted the World Pride Human Rights Conference.
Oh, okay, great.
And an Oakville company, Zakova Vodka, importing Ukrainian vodka into Canada, they very much aligned themselves with the LGBT and had been long-term supporters. And what they did was they sponsored 4 Ukrainian activists to come across and participate in the Human Rights Conference. Otherwise, Ukraine wouldn't have had a voice at the conference. And they asked me, it's a long story, but I'll shorten it, they asked me to video the week. And so kind of do a little fly on the wall documentary just to capture everything that was going on, because they'd created, there were TV interviews, there were radio interviews, there was a lot of meetings, a lot of conferences, stuff like that. And so I came along and I committed a week to doing that. And of course, Elena was one of the 4. And at the end of the Pride March, which was brutal in that beautiful day that it was, but it was hot, and I'm carrying a camera all day, almost 6 or 7 hours, and we crashed.
I didn't look so good at the end.
Oh, no, I did not look so good at the end. And we crashed at the after party and sat next to each other, and the rest of it is history. Yeah, so we've been together since then.
Wow.
And so we went on actually to make Pride of Ukraine, which is a documentary about the Pride movement in Ukraine. And that was created out of the week here in Toronto was the catalyst for that. And we then, between us, decided to make something bigger than just a fly on the wall doc.
We are going to commercial break. And when we come back, we can talk about that. Your second film was Transgender Life in Slovenia. And that was 2016. So we can talk a little bit about those when we get back. Don't go anywhere. We've got more to come.
Don't stop.
That's right. Don't stop listening. Mission Unstoppable with Coach Frankie Picasso will continue right after these messages.
Stop.
It's words you never heard.
Have you heard about Mel and Joy Schwanke, a Nebraska couple that have worn matching outfits for the last 35 years? Apparently, they have over 140 matching outfits, all custom-made, which typically match her dress with his tie. The couple is a match made in heaven. Neither one of them can remember the exact date they started this quirky tradition, but they both contend it's one of the elements that have held their marriage together an impressive 65 years. What do you call a marriage between well-matched people? Nomagamosis. Mr. and Mrs. Schwanke say that Velcro connects them because they do everything together. If you like doting on your wife with excessive fondness, you would be uxorious. And a woman who is excessively devoted to her husband is meritorious.
It's words you never heard.
I'm Carolyn Davidson, and you can have fun challenging your words you never heard vocabulary with my free app, Too Funny for Word.
It's the Fitness Minute with fitness expert Annette Hammond.
Even with all the research that's available to us, I still hear women ask if weightlifting will make them masculine. The truth is, rather than causing women to build bigger muscles, weight training generally creates a tighter physique. Doing weights properly and consistently will give you firmer legs, shapelier and sculpted arms, in addition to a flatter abdomen. When I am working with women clients, we always include weightlifting in our fitness program because instead of making them look bigger, we sculpt their body to make them look smaller and tighter. Men, on the other hand, have much more testosterone than women, and when men lift heavy weights, they actually grow larger and stronger. It's been said that women produce 1/10 of the amount of testosterone that men produce, so the effects of weight training are very different. Include weightlifting in your daily exercise and enjoy the results. I'm Annette Hammond.
Well, we mentioned two of the documentary films that Michelle produced, The Pride of Ukraine 2015, which premiered at the Canadian Embassy in the Ukraine, and her second, Transgender Life in Slovenia. Now, you did this through Sanctuary Studios, which is your business. You have a social enterprise, web design, digital marketing business that you that's your daily job, I guess.
Yes, it is.
And so you make documentary films and you help people make websites and you market to women and as well as LGBT, and it helps thrive, I guess, your activism roles that you do and pay for those.
Yes.
As you go about your the activism
absolutely.
work that you do, but your daily life, everybody has to pay the rent.
Yeah, we have to pay the rent. And, activism isn't cheap. There isn't a lot of funding out there. And I'm independent, so I'm not tied to any one organization. And so what I did, this really only happened last summer, last fall, was I just realized that I had these islands of activity that were going on. I had the studio. We were doing video production, photography, some web design and stuff like that. That was happening. I had my activism and advocacy work, and I also had my documentary films, and it just made sense all of a sudden to bring these things together under the one umbrella and just simplified things, but also it found that synergy, right? So on the one hand, we excel at what we do in terms of serving particularly female entrepreneurs is primarily our client base, actually exclusively our client base.
Yes.
And so we serve them in terms of giving them a web presence and their digital marketing and all of that other good stuff. And the money that we raise from that, it contributes to the cost and offsets the costs of the activism and advocacy work, and indeed sponsors in some part the production of documentary films. And obviously we apply for grants and we look for other funding sources to help us with that. But nevertheless, we bring it together. And then the last piece, which really only came together just before back in the fall, was that we seek to employ LGB and particularly T skilled people who are unable to employ their skills in their local marketplace due to fear or discrimination or harassment or whatever. So finding a job for me after transition was very difficult, and I started the studio as a way of paying the rent, right?
Sure.
Because I couldn't actually at that point get a meaningful job. Because of prejudice and discrimination, and it's subversive discrimination. So it's not something that anybody publishes or it's out there. It's just that the opportunities don't come our way, and I'm not alone in this. I'm not, even here in Canada. Now I do know that many very successful trans people that are working in great jobs, doing amazing things, but I've really seen that change happen only over the last 5 years or so.
And is this because of outward appearance? I mean, that's really all they could go on, isn't it?
Well, it's not really about outward appearance so much as it's just, if you think about it, you're an HR executive, you're going through all of those resumes, and you sort of pick out the candidates. And then the next thing you're going to do, particularly today, is you're going to Google them, right? Mm-hmm. Find out, and you're going to check on Facebook, see what their, what their background looks like, check out their LinkedIn. And by that time, I was openly out and I was sharing my story, and so I was everywhere.
Yeah.
So, and then when you're making a selection process, you're looking at skills, you're looking at resources, experience, but you're also looking at other factors. And even though the legislation may stop you from discriminating against age, race, religion, gender identity, sexual orientation, it happens. We know it happens, right? And so that's a situation. So I know many very highly qualified trans people who are now in barely minimum wage jobs. And we actually saw this in a study that was done called Trans Pulse, that found the vast majority of trans people, particularly trans women, are earning less than $15,000 a year here in Canada.
Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, I could see at the age that you were, at 50, at 56 even, for myself, it would be difficult to go and get a job.
Yes, it would.
No matter
And
what my skill is, because of course they're going to look at you, hey, you know what, I can get somebody in early 30s, late 20s who look great and have much more energy than you. And, they're going to go and do that same job.
absolutely. And, when you look at it, I was a director of IT, so it was very much a male-dominated and male-oriented field. Nowhere near enough women getting into IT or into senior positions in IT. So not only did I have my age, I was a woman, I was also a trans woman, and if you looked me up, you'd find I was also a lesbian. And so all of these things, and an activist, and, really, do I need all of this in my company? Right?
Yeah.
So there's that concern that you're taking on all of this extra baggage, and do I really need to deal with that? Maybe I'll take this other client. And there was actually a study done in the US, a blind.
We'll get pregnant.
Well, yeah, unfortunately. But there was also a study done in the US, a blind study, and it actually showed that employers would take a less qualified individual that was not trans.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so that's a sad situation.
It is a sad situation. Yeah.
But in many parts of the country, or in the world, in many parts of the world, and particularly places such as Russia and Ukraine and the Baltic states and down into Latin America and Africa, we see that it is beyond that level of prejudice. There's just such open homophobia and transphobia that you just cannot be open. So you can't be yourself and work in your chosen field at the same time. Yeah. And I think that is very sad, and that's what we strive to do with Sanctuary Studios, is to try and provide those people with meaningful work in their chosen field, exploiting their skills and experience.
Well, good thing they got you, Michelle.
I'm trying.
Good thing they got you. And I love that, you came out 6 years ago and it's like, boom, she's like an activist and she's doing documentaries and it's like, okay, world, look at it, because here I am. I was shy for all that time, but now I'm here. I'm showing up, and I'm showing up big. So that's pretty cool.
Thank you. But part of it too is because I lost everything. Yes. I've got nothing left to lose. Yeah. Right. So part of my, that visibility, if you will, part of stepping into all of this is, what else do I have to lose? Let's just do this. And if I can do this, if I can make the difference in one person's life, if I can stop, one person from wasting another single day living in fear or not being their true, authentic selves out of fear, then I'm a happy girl. Right. Yeah. And so that's certainly where I started with my advocacy work. The activism come a little bit later, and then the documentary films. I never planned to make documentary films. I was in video production for a long time doing commercial work. Yeah. But the documentary film was quite by accident. And but I'm so excited, right? And what you do is, when you step into that power and when you step into that authentic self, the universe just suddenly starts presenting all of these different opportunities for you. Mm-hmm. And I just chose to say yes more often than I chose to say no.
Good for you. I think that much of mainstream America, Canada, whatever, got a little bit of an understanding about what it is to be transgender watching Jazz Jennings. And I think that, she's a young girl. We watched her, go from 12 to 16. I think she's 16 or 17 now. And a lot of the considerations and the problems that go along with her, she brought some of those out. Now, we're not going to talk about surgery or anything like that, but being young and being, in your 50s and transitioning and being a young girl who doesn't have to go through puberty. And that was her biggest fear. I can't go through puberty. Please don't make me go through puberty. I don't want to do that. And she had a couple of friends who did go through puberty and were having a very difficult time in high school, where even though she was having a difficult time, she really looked and sounded more female. More like a girl. So because she didn't transition through puberty. So what would you say, being at the age that you are today and looking at the younger people, is there any advice for them, or, knowing what you went through, like your whole life, like what would you say?
I don't know that I have a lot to say now. You know why? Because the youth of today have a lot to say for themselves. And I love that, right? So, what we see in schools throughout the country are gay straight alliances. These are student-led groups, GSAs, that embrace the diversity. We never had that kind of thing when I was going through school. And we also have a much bigger awareness now of trans issues, of trans as an existence, and validating that exists and it's true and it's real and it's not a psychiatric disorder. And so now what we're seeing is parents too, and I truly admire the parents that do this. I work with some who embrace their child and allow them to explore their gender identity and to be able to share with the world their sense of self at an early age. And puberty is a critical time, because puberty is when we have all of those nasty changes one way or the other. And so for a trans child going through puberty is hell, total hell. I recall it. I remember it.
I can imagine. Yeah. And what about so the doctors then? Are the doctors on board? Are they, are they few and far between, or can you just go to your family doctor and say, hey, this is what's happening. Don't make me go through this?
Well, this is one of the big changes that's happened since Prime Minister Trudeau took over, is that we've seen that the gatekeeper, which was CAMH in Toronto, and we're just seeing that here, so I can talk about it here. But we now see that there's over 800 family doctors across the province that are now able to work with trans kids. So it's much easier now.
Oh, that's good.
To be able to go and work with your family doctor. Now, they may not have the skills and experience to work with you directly, but what they do is then they work with their peers, endocrinologists and other doctors, but still continue to provide primary health care at a local level. And that is critical. It's absolutely critical that be available to youngsters. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I'm glad that that's happening. Although I could talk about our healthcare. I'm not going to go there.
I'm not saying it's perfect by any stretch.
And talk about it's not a disease. On the weekend, we're going to go to break. We'll talk about this when we come back. Surely you guys have heard about Yiannapolis. I mean, you've heard about this man and how crazy he is, and he's pulling some big ones out of his butthole, I'm going to say. So when we come back, we're going to talk about that. Don't go anywhere. We're coming right back with Michelle Emson. Mission Unstoppable.
Don't stop listening. Mission Unstoppable with Coach Frankie Picasso will continue right after these messages.
Stop.
It's words you never heard.
We have a book titled The Art of Doing Nothing by Veronica Bien in our guest room by the bed. I'm telling you, this book is an impossible challenge. In the state of Maine, it's said that someone who bottoms chairs for a living is lazy, presumably because one's bottom is perpetually in the chair. To sozzle means to laze around or perform a task in a sloppy way. The word is mainly found in New England. A quote from 1848 describes the term as used by housekeepers in certain parts of Connecticut to refer to a lazy person. Other words for lazy people are abbey lubbers, scabberlatchers, and slaughter pooches. To me, the ultimate loblolly is someone who is too lazy to even fake like they're working.
It's words you never heard.
I'm Carolyn Davidson, and you can have fun challenging your words you never heard vocabulary with my free app, Too Funny for Words.
It's the Fitness Minute with fitness expert Annette Hammond.
What has less than 50 calories per serving is rich in potassium, B vitamins, beta-carotene, and a great source of fiber? It is pumpkin. There are many fabulous ways to reap the benefits of this winter squash from October to February. CNN reports the pumpkin is nearly 90% water, and 1 cup of canned pumpkin has 7 grams of fiber. Fiber slows digestion and will help you feel fuller longer, which is fabulous for weight loss. It has nearly 20% of the daily vitamin C requirements, which is wonderful for your immune system. They also state that pumpkin can lower cancer risk and help keep your skin younger looking. But one of the most beneficial reasons to enjoy pumpkin is that it packs over 200% of the daily recommended intake of vitamin A and other antioxidants that help prevent macular degeneration and cataracts.
And we're back. Mission Unstoppable Radio. I am your host, Frankie Picasso. We're here with Michelle Emson, and we're so glad that you're here too. Thanks for sticking around. Well, we're back. I left you with a comment about Milo Yiannopoulos, and I had shared a story on Bill Mayer's on his show with Michelle earlier in the week, and that this guy is just out of control, and it got so bad on the show that Larry Wilmore just had to tell him to F off, because he was such an ass. But he talks about he's gay. He talks about gay being a disorder. He says that trans is a psychological disorder, and he's just out of control, and he has a mouth that just needs to be washed out with soap, really. But he was kicked off Twitter, and this weekend he was supposed to speak at a conference, and they finally pulled the plug on him because he talked about how it benefited him from a police molesting him when he was a teenager, and that the idea of 13-year-olds having sex with older men is a good thing. So he has now been shut up, hopefully.
Oh, I don't think we've heard the last from him.
No, probably not. But as he should be shut up. He's doing nobody anywhere any favors, really. Mm-mm. No,
but his success is based on that rhetoric, and also on he strives and thrives on this negative feedback. I mean, we heard it on the Bill Mayer show after Larry Wilmore told him to F off. He was then seeking everyone on that panel to tell him to F off.
Yeah.
That's what he wanted. He wanted that, and he was plainly asking them to give him that, right? So that sensationalism is his platform. But it is extremely damaging. He said some very damaging things during that segment, and absolute untruths. And it's hard to see that going on. It's
very
not
difficult.
Yeah.
Let's go to pleasanter things, but I did want to bring him up. Michelle's been selected as a finalist for the prestigious 2017 Mompreneurs Momentum Award, and they are a organization that are 20,000 strong nationwide in Canada, an organization of female entrepreneurs, and you are a finalist. So how do we find out when you win?
Oh my gosh. Check my Twitter and Facebook on March the 4th. We have a 2-day Mompreneur conference in Toronto. I think there's something over 300 female entrepreneurs coming in for 2 days of learning and networking and experience, and it's just going to be absolutely fantastic. The organizers and the CEO, Maria Locker, a fantastic friend of mine, is announcing the winners on the Saturday afternoon. She's making us wait to the very last moment. But honestly, the community, we actually have a private Facebook group of the finalists across all 4 categories. And every one of us is unanimous in as much as we've already won, right?
Nice.
So,
yeah. Well, who else is up in that? Who else is there? Like what other business?
Oh my gosh, it's right across the board. Across the board. Some fantastic people in there doing amazing things. And I don't actually have the list.
And what was the criteria for it, Michelle? What was the criteria? Just being a female entrepreneur, somebody who does good things in the world, or what? So
the Momentum Award is, so Mompreneurs Momentum is the nonprofit arm of the Mompreneur Group.
Nice.
And yeah, so they do some amazing community-based work. And so what they did was a couple of years ago or so, they added the Mompreneur Award, the Momentum Award, for those businesses, those heart-led businesses that are focused on giving back in some way, and non-profit organizations too, because we have some non-profits within the Mompreneurs membership. And, excuse me. And so that was the criteria. It was one of A, being a mompreneur, B, having a thriving business, and C, giving back, right? So exactly, what we do, but amazing things that we see from other women in that group too.
Awesome. And I just want to make sure that we get your website in. It's sanctuary-studios.ca.
Yes, it is.
And people can reach you if they want to talk to you at info@sanctuary-studios.ca.
Absolutely. And I welcome all messages, and love to hear from people. You can find me on Facebook too. I'm easy to find there as well.
And Michelle, if people wanted to get a job, if somebody was trans and really had a difficult time finding work, what kind of work might they look for with you, or what might you be able to help them with?
So I can help them with a variety of things around digital marketing. So graphics design, search engine optimization, content management, right? So for blogging, keyword research and ad management, because we manage Facebook campaigns for our clients and AdWord campaigns.
Okay, so they don't even have to
design.
move. They could just stay at home and work from home.
No, I'm a digital nomad, and I created the company exactly on that model. I don't have a bricks and mortar because I don't know where I'm going to be. And so I have to be able to work from anywhere in the world, including 38,000 feet. Yeah,
nice. I love that. I'm the same. I think it's great. I think that's what makes this world. I'm a techno. I just love technology. So I have like 3 iPads and all kinds of stuff. I just think, I'm a Gemini. You want to give us something wonderful, you give us something technological. But I think it's just so much fun to be able to communicate with the world. And that's, this show's like that because we're all over the world, because we're internet, and that's what makes it so exciting.
It is exciting, and I've been working remotely for actually most of my career, certainly the last 30 years. And, I know how to leverage time zones, right? So it's great. Before I go to bed of an evening when I'm wrapping up work, I'm sending a brief out to my graphics designer in Ukraine. And by the time I wake up the following morning, they've sent me back the work and I'm ready to go, right? So, those time zone differences that, you might think work against you, they don't. You can often leverage those and really make use of them. So I don't care where anybody is in the world, so long as they have a good internet connection, we're good to go.
Awesome. And you, if somebody wanted to talk to you about your own personal story, let's say somebody just advice or things like that, do you want them to write to you at Sanctuary, or did you want them to find you a different way?
Oh, no. You can Google me and find me easily, michellemson.ca, or just write to me, michelle@sanctuary-studios.ca. I'd love to connect. And similarly on Facebook, you can find me very easily on Facebook there too. Yeah. What
are you working on activist-wise now?
Actually, I've got 2 exciting projects that we're trying to fund. So, transgender life in Slovenia was an interesting study of 10 trans and non-binary people from across the country. And what I did with that was I shot their segments in their hometowns and villages wherever possible. And totally loved that, right? So we were actually in the middle of a square having this interview talking about the trans lived experience in the country. I want to do the same thing here. I want to do it in Canada. So we have a project in treatment. We're trying to seek funding for it right now. And what we're looking to do is we're looking to interview trans people from across the country, all the provinces, remote cities. What's it like to be trans in Whitehorse, for example?
Right. Yeah.
Right. And we know that the lived experiences in different cities and different provinces is very, very different. And I'd like to bring that together. And one of the really key things here is, we speak about visibility, and Larry spoke about this on the Bill Maher show, how important visibility is in seeking acceptance. If we're invisible, if we're in the closet, if we're in hiding, if we aren't openly out in our community, how's anybody going to accept us? And this is true for any minority, right? It's not just LGBT. And so through the documentary films, what we do is we amplify the voice of those that are willing, courageous, brave enough to share some of this journey and story on film. And we use that as a way of trying to increase awareness.
Right.
So making that accessible. And we've just seen that with Nat Geographic and Katie Couric with the Gender Revolution documentary that's just been released. So we use that as a tool to amplify what we're doing, and our visibility.
Well, you truly are unstoppable. I love that about you.
Yes, I am.
And on a side note, Michelle is the last chapter in I Bared My Chest, the book that I've mentioned a few times, maybe more on Frankie Sense and Mission Unstoppable. But it's a book, where 21 women, unstoppable women, dig for bold and share their naked truth. And I'm so excited that she has joined us in our book and is the 21st woman. So I'm proud of that.
Oh, and I'm
so
honored to be a part of that project because I love it. I love that. And, the other 20 authors on that project are all truly incredible women doing amazing things. And to be a part of that group is an honor. And so thank you very much for inviting me to that. I'm looking forward to it. And I've almost written my chapter.
Oh, yay. Well, you have been apart from your fiance for a little bit. We've got 2 minutes left, but Olena's coming back, you said, in March. And do you have a wedding date planned?
No, we don't. No,
okay.
But it's probably about time we thought about that. But
you want to say it on air?
Oh no, no! I don't think I could get away with doing that. No.
Okay.
No, we will. We will. It will happen. It'll likely happen here in Canada. That's the most likely place for it to occur. But we'll see. No, right now we don't have a definite date. We're just way too busy doing what we're doing.
Yes.
And she's a very, very active activist, working across Ukraine in particular, but also elsewhere in Europe, and helping us here in Canada. So she's also a representative of Ukrainian LGBT in a lot of activities that are going on here in Canada. So yeah, one of these days we'll get around to it.
Yeah. Do you think things are getting easier?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And the biggest part is to just show up. I mean, I've moved up into Muskoka, a most unlikely place for me to call home, I guess. Very rural community, very seasonal community, but has been just wonderfully embracing. And most of that is just because I show up. And we can all do that. We can all just, step into our authentic selves, step into our power, step into our energy, and show up in the world.
I love that. You've been listening to Michelle Emson. You've heard her story. I'm sure you've fallen in love with her just like I have. And I want to thank you again, Michelle, for being a guest today on Mission Unstoppable Radio. Thank you, Ben, for producing the show. And thank each and every one of you for tuning in as you do each and every week, because I do so appreciate you all. Stay unstoppable. We'll see you next time on Mission Unstoppable.
Don't stop.
When the chips were down, they didn't stop. Stories of people who, when the odds were against them, turned defeat into victory. You've been listening to Mission Unstoppable with Coach Frankie Picasso. See you next time, and always remember...
Don't stop.